Hello and welcome. Thank you for popping into my channel. If you are new here, please like and subscribe for me. If you find this content helpful, smash that notification bell so that you don't miss out on the next video. Comment below with anything that you need help with or topics you'd like me to cover, and check out my website, consultingninja.tech. With that out of the way, let's get to it. We are looking at Node.js Express. I'm going to show you guys how to set up an API. And I'm going to be using Express to get this going, and then we're just going to delete some stuff out because it's much faster to do it that way. I have this directory just called API. Let's do an npx express-generator. This is going to install a couple of things really quickly, and then it also spits everything into the directory that you're in, so make sure that you're in the directory you actually want this in before you run that command. And then you have to do an npm install to install all the node modules required to actually run what it installs there. So now that I have all of that stuff installed, let's get into the code. And right away, we're just going to delete some things that we're not going to use. So we're not going to use any of the views. You can delete that. We're also not going to use any of the public folders, so you can delete all of that right away. Now inside of app, this is all of your boilerplate setup. I want to show you guys in here right away how to deal with cores. If you're going to be using this for a back-end API, you're definitely going to need to handle cores. There's a few ways of doing this. You can install, there's a cores package, and you can do an npm install cores, and you can tell it to just app.use and say cores like this, and it'll pretty much take care of anything you need to and open up all of your backend for any kind of cross-origin requests. However, I'm kind of a nerd, and so I always look at how to do things the way that they are supposed to be done without any additional software. And in the case of a backend API, it's really about maybe 6 or 7 lines of code that you need to write in order to deal with cores from the backend perspective. Now, if you are requesting data from your front end to this API, you're most likely going to be sending something with that request. That's going to mean that inside of your fetch, you're going to have something like fetch URL, and then afterwards you're going to have this object that has, a method, and it's probably going to have, post like this, and then it will have body. And then in here you're going to be sending some data, and you'll also probably have some additional headers like content type application JSON. As soon as you get to modifying the headers and the body, you are outside of the realm of a regular GET request. You are outside of the realm of what they consider a standard post these days. They're tightening down on that stuff. And what's going to happen is the browser, any browser, is going to automatically send an options request first. Before it ever sends a post request that you're asking it to send, the browser itself is going to send an options request to the URL you're telling it, and it's going to ask, hey, what am I allowed to do here on this back end? And that's what you need to deal with. That's what cores is trying to work against, is cross-origin resource sharing. And so the browser immediately asks, what am I allowed to do here? In order to deal with that options request, right below the var app equals express, you have to do this before any routes. You have to deal with this first. So do app.options, and we're going to say, hey, any options request that comes here, we're going to deal with all of them, regardless of route. If it's an options request, we want to do something with that right out of the gate here. So you do an asterisk and then a comma, and then say function, request, response, and next. And we are going to use 2 of the 3. Just outside there, open up your brackets, and then here's where we need to really write the code. And here, it's pretty much 2 things that we really need to do. We need to do a response.header. We need to send back what origins are allowed to be accessed. So access, control, allow, origin, like that, and then the actual origin. For us, it's going to be just one. I'm going to be using at some point, not today, but at some point I'm going to have this hooked up to a front end running Svelte. And so it's going to be localhost port 5173. This is going to be whatever URL you're going to be pinging the backend from. If you want to make this open, if you look this up online, they're going to tell you to just do an asterisk to say everything, right? And you can do that if you are purposely making a public-facing API. Then go ahead and do that, and then you can, inside of your routes, you can do some more restrictive stuff. But if you're not purposely making a public-facing API, don't put the asterisks in there. Find out what your origin is and put it directly here. Now, if you're going to be setting up something for production and you want to have, your local host or, your testing server and then your production URL, you can do that easily by just wrapping this in an array and then just have one and then the next. So another URL like that. We don't need to do that. We're just going to have one. So I just put it like that. The very first thing that we need to tell the browser is say, hey, the origin that you're calling from is allowed. If you don't have this first, the CORS crashes there. The next thing that the options request is trying to ask is what headers are allowed to be sent to this backend. And so to answer that question, we simply send an access control allow headers. And if you set this up and you're still getting an error in your browser, just look at what it says. It's going to be telling you what the problem is, and then you just address it here. So the only ones that we need are x-requested-with and content type, because we're going to be sending content type equals application.json to the back. And then we do this next. And what this is saying is do these two things and then just let this request continue on. So that is all you have to do to deal with CORS in your app.js. But inside your actual route, and we'll come back to finish the rest of that file, inside your actual routes, you then also have to have an additional response.header inside of there as well. So the CORS is going to force the browser to send this options request, and it's going to send it back and fulfill that access control allow origin for the options request, but you also need to have one for the post request as well. So inside of your route, this is one that they had already set up. It's a GET, but it doesn't matter if it's a GET or a post. Whatever kind of method you're using, you have to also put one of these response.headers with the access control allow origin right inside here and do that first. So that when you get your GET or post, whatever it is, you can change this to post. It's going to send that back, and now your CORS problem will be solved. You'll no longer have a CORS problem here. So it's going to send back that origin's allowed, and it's going to say, hey, these are the headers that are allowed as well, and then it's going to let your post request continue on to the route. If you're not going to use these routes, go ahead and delete those out. Oh, I'm sorry, there is one other thing. Let's delete those views because we're not using those views, and then give that a save. Inside of the bin, there's a www file, and here we do need to do some stuff. So here we have our imports, but the very first thing that we're actually doing inside this file is setting the port. It first looks to see if there's an environment variable set, and if there's not, then it will use this string. You can delete this out if you're not going to use the environment variable and just leave it hard-coded. What I want to point out though is that this needs to be specific. If you're using a React application on your local machine or on the same server, you definitely cannot use 3000 because React uses port 3000. And Create React app also uses port 3000. So just be mindful that what port you're using is not being used, or what port you're wanting to use is not being used. And then the other thing inside of here that I will point out is there's already, if you use Express Generator, some error handling to check if that port's being used. It will spit out these errors. The E address in use, the error address in use, error if that port's already being used, and then this if you don't have good enough access privileges, it'll tell you that as well. All the way down at the bottom here, there is this function on listening. Now for all the boilerplate they put in here, I don't understand why they don't have something like this, but they don't have anything to tell you that the server is actually going. So do a console.log server is running on port ... and then spit out the port from above like this. And now once we run this, you'll get this message as long as everything is good. So we definitely want to do that. All right, our app is done, our app.js is done, and the www is all good, so we can close that. Now you just need to set up your routes. So what kind of routes are you going to have? That's the question. A GET request route, and that just spits back a certain set of data regardless of who's requesting. It's just going to spit back whatever. Are you going to be taking in some values and then doing something with it? If you're going to be doing something with it, then you need a post request, and then you also need to pull the data out inside of the request.body. If you want to just see the data, you can do a console.log in here, and it'd be request.body like that, and you can see what is coming from your front end. And then so what I'm going to be doing is hooking this up to that Mongo database, and we're going to be running some commands to it and from it. And so you also want to make sure, if you're going to be doing that, that you make this an async function, so that inside of here you can await your database commands. So you do let users equal await, and then you can define a function, say get all users, and we'll pass in the database connection dot collection, and then you just write the helper function, and you can put this inside of your route, or you could put it inside of another file if you'd like. If you needed to have, you know, optional routes or further nesting of your route, so this users.js, if we look real quickly inside of our app, this is the /users route. So it would be whatever this IP is, whatever the IP address of this backend is, /users. If you needed some further nesting of that, you could have an additional router.post and then / something else. So if you needed further nesting, you just do this, and users / like user ID, or if you had a param or something like that on your route. And this is no longer a GET, it's a post. And then you take in the data, which is going to be in the body if you've done it correctly in the front. Look for something in the database or update something in the database, and then respond with, it actually wouldn't be response.send, it would be response.json, and then whatever data you're sending. Whatever data, like that. And then you can access that in the front just like you normally would with a fetch, and then either .then or the await syntax, and you just do the response.json like that. And I will go through that portion. I just want this video to focus on the backend API. So once you have all of the routes set up for your app the way that you want, and you have them labeled like you'd like them to be labeled, and inside of there you're doing everything that you want to do, you just import those into your app.js. You import them like this, what they require, and then you do an app.use, the route that it's going to live on, and then the file that you've imported here. So you do a require, so var users router equals require, and then app.use, and tell it this route is going to use this file, this imported file. So this is how you set up an Express Node.js a backend API. I hope that you guys have found this video helpful. We're going to continue. I'm going to continue. The next step is going to be setting up a front end to interact with this. And then the last video is going to be putting this all together to show you guys authentication. I hope that you guys have found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a like and comment below with what you guys have thought about this. Stay tuned for the next video. And as always, have a great day.